Hello, welcome to the Self Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Now, let us start our discussion on Unit 6 Political Economy of Development, and we are continuing our topic Poverty of Income Comparisons. Nevertheless, it is the main features of the global social, economic, political, and cultural divide which constitutes the problematic of the political economy of development. Of course, the internal differentiation and inequalities of a country are related to persistent and growing international inequalities and form a major component of the development discourse. However, in order to be able to discuss these issues properly, we have to deal with the legacy of the persistent popularity and official level excessive, almost exclusive recognition of the income related yardsticks of development. It is no doubt true that the income flow or access to regular supply of goods and services is essential and cannot be ignored and have to be ensured. The moot point is, can it be made a exclusive all important development factors as an essential precondition for everything else? An important factor responsible for taking such an aggregated and one-sided view seems to be the monopolization of the development issues by economic in the form of a popular, technically rigorous and influential subdiscipline called economics of development, especially as it involved in the rich countries. This discipline was substantially shaped and developed by the establishment of the rich countries and the UN organizations dominated by them. Of course, with a considerable contribution by the independent academics from several parts of the world, including India, who had little formal linkages with the ideological, cultural, and technological apparatus of the rich nations. This is an approach which perpetuates the hegemony of those who can, by means of their command over resources and institutions, control the process of income growth along with conferring a better part of the incomes generated. Hence, the existing power centers and controllers of the economy portray income growth as the essence of development. As a result, an apparently techno-economic perspective on development with accent on quantifiable aspects and macroeconomic variables like saving, investments, GDP, external balance, general price level, factor mobility, etc., came to dominate development related academic discourse, practical policy making, and international development activities and cooperation. Naturally, this exercise carries a strong imprint of the mainstream neoclassical economics, which was concerned more with justifying, perpetuating with growing strength, and selling the existing reality as rational rather than to explain it. Let alone transfer it for the goods of the hitherto marginalized and excluded, especially as the latter would have it. Hence, it concerned with the growth of the national income and following the patterns followed earlier on in the rich countries. It is basically to serve the processes of capital accumulation under the control of and in the image of the big corporates based in the rich early industrialized countries. The processes of industrialization, technological innovations, and capital accumulation contributed to the power, prosperity, and global dominance of a minority of people from the rich countries, with some junior role by the top governing and influential strata from the poor, non industrialized countries. The outcomes of these processes were captured in the per capita income, which thus bears no necessary positive relationship to the development and welfare of those not directly initiating and controlling capital accumulation, technological progress, and expanding production processes. Thus, it follows that GDP in various forms is not only an overly qualified indicator but is also a highly imperfect, imprecise, incomplete, biased, and misleading indicator. Given the historical legacy of multidimensional inequalities, it basically configures the interest of the big international capital dominating the rich industrialized countries, tendenциally or mistakenly described as developed or advanced countries, and following this usage the term has been adopted by many through sheer mental inertia. This is because the processes of capital accumulation, industrialization, along with the consequential social relations, international relations, lifestyles, technologies, marketization based on cultural products, and the symbols derived from or related to them mainly further the interest and power of those who are commanding these processes of capital accumulation and industrialization. These processes exclude and marginalize a much larger number than the number they incorporate and empower, and in the bargain increase the dependence of the former majority on the later minority. The Indian experience of modern industrialization, both during the colonial period and the post independence era, clearly shows that the share of industry in both the GDP and in the workforce remains a small fraction not only of the age old agriculture but also of the rapidly expanding service sector. In fact, the organized industrial sector employment of over 400 million strong workforce of India was in the year 2001 barely 7.43 million, that is under 2% of the workforce in both the public and private sectors taken together. Thus, one can see why there are powerful forces ranged in support of the perpetuation of national income as the indicator of development and economic growth, as the most important objective and very essence and definition of economic development. Note that the glaring and thoroughly exposed weaknesses, infirmities, and distorted world view associated with the treating economic growth as synonymous with not only economic development but development as such have not been recognized by many of the growth enthusiasts themselves. As correctives, they add some additional indicators to GDP or GNP bandwagon, qualify the growth indicator, even devise numerous alternative quantitative indicators like quality of life, human development index, basic or minimum needs, social indicators of development or growth with justice, comprehensive development framework, etc. But in various direct or circuitous ways continue the adherence to and prominence of GDP or GDP based indicators and theories. If centrality of GDP growth were to be sacrificed and replaced by alternative definitions, measures, indicators, etc., which are concerned with and reflect the conditions, interests, aspirations, and institutions of the presently disadvantaged, discriminated, and deprived people. The top brass of both the industrialized and poor countries would be on way to losing their power and hegemony. No such hierarchy can be reasonably expected from anyone. The other stakeholders have themselves to articulate their interests and values and define development in ways indicating that the people really matter. Then only would development would be of the people, for the people, and by the people. Now let us wind up the session and take rest. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the self-learning podcast.